Good morning, folks. It is Wednesday, February 26th, and in the left chair this morning is my old friend Jim Wilfong. And as always, there's way too much going on than we're going to possibly be able to cover, but we hope to make a few intelligent remarks from different perspectives in a civil manner, and hopefully you can learn from those different perspectives and maybe edify.
Or get a laugh out of them.
Get a laugh, maybe so. Right, there you go. So we'll start. The producer always gives us two questions that we haven't seen, and we begin with the first one. And it says, recent reports indicate that Russia is attempting to influence our elections in favor of President Trump and Bernie Sanders. Do you believe the government's doing enough to combat Russian influence in our elections? Why do you think they would want to encourage a Bernie Sanders victory in the Democrat Party? So there's a couple of questions there.
Yeah.
Do you believe, the first one says, do you believe government is doing enough to combat Russian influence in our elections? Well, that presupposes that it's actually a big factor. You want to take it?
Well, I assume they are. I always, and not just them. I wouldn't be surprised to find the Brits were doing it.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And of course we've been doing it forever.
Yes, we have.
And so it's not surprising, but they have they have a lot more tools than they used to have in the past. The social media affords them, a way to contact very targeted and specific groups. To be perfectly honest, the thing that, when it comes to the propaganda will be hard to stop, more than likely, but we ought to be stopping. If it means that we have to go back to, for the most part, paper ballots, which of course we have in Maine, then we have to go back to paper ballots. But having them really interfere, which means somehow hacking a system and being able to change votes and add to votes, that of course would be deadly to any country.
It would.
And
well, I'm glad
you know what
you
I
said
mean.
that.
So
Because we're both. You're a little bit older than I am, but we're the same generation.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We've been paying attention for a long time.
For a long time.
And we grew up during the Cold War. We came of age, so we know that there was the Soviet Union, the United States, and our satellites, and we would try and influence elections in our satellites and their satellites to try and bring some of them our way, and they'd do the same, bring some of ours their way.
Oh yeah.
And so we've been interfering in elections, and so in this Cold War milieu for decades. For decades. If the Russians are interfering in our elections, so what else is new, right? I mean,
we should be paying attention and trying to combat it because they have really skillful people within the FSB, used to be the KGB. I mean, those are skillful people. Well, we have skillful people as well.
We do.
And what we need, I think the major difference is their ability to hack the election. To actually hack the election.
If votes are done and tabulated electronically.
Electronically. They're not hacking Stowe or Lovell's election. Right. And the other thing is with being able to manipulate social media tools that make it so they have access to right down to very small groups of people, and which they didn't have before.
You're a selectman.
Yeah.
And you conduct elections in Stowe, so there's special elections, there are primary elections, there are general elections, and so forth. So we know what it costs because we have to budget for it.
Yes.
And so we have to get people to staff the counting of votes, and so what, like for example, the New Hampshire primary, the Nevada caucus, the
Iowa caucus,
and the Nevada. I didn't need to know at midnight who won.
I
was perfectly content to wait until the next day to find out. And it's the same with all elections. I don't need to know right away. Why do we need to know right away?
It's the 24-hour news cycle.
I can't.
Is television's on. I think that's what's helped to push this. And I'm not saying that we ought to bend to them. because I don't think we should.
But we are.
We need to, I know, but we have been. And I think we should be making sure that whatever the count is, that it's accurate as you can get it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you in Stowe, if you lived in Stowe, and of course I lived there, you're sitting across the table and you count one stack, I count this stack.
And we switch.
And we write it down, then we switch
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
And
you represent the Democrat committee, I represent the Republican committee.
exactly.
And, yeah.
And then we agree, and
Right.
when we agree, we put it on a tally sheet.
Right. Now, what's wrong with that?
That's a good way to do
It is, and then the evidence still exists. You have to save it for however many months or years, and so
Whatever.
if you think something went wrong, go back and look.
You
check
can go
everything
back
out.
and check it out.
Right, so-
and they do.
What's wrong with
And-
that system?
oh,
Let's just go back to it.
I don't have
Solve a lot of-
anything wrong with that system.
Jeez.
That's my view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just have to battle, but it goes back to the very beginning in this country. And the very beginning, they wanted to have public education for Jefferson to have his yeoman farmer citizens be literate so that they could understand the issues that were before them. And so
A noble cause.
Absolutely, I'm right there with them. And so we need to have that happen. We need to have literate citizens who can look at it and say, this is Russian propaganda, this is French propaganda, whatever, or they can see that, wait a minute, this may not be anything we should pay attention to.
Exactly. So, the lesson is, okay, facts and opinions, separate the two. Logic and feelings, separate the two.
Yes.
And, sometimes they merge, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But you just be able to recognize one when you see it, or a blend of two when you see it, and be able to determine how much of one, how much of the other.
And
That's critical thinking.
It's critical thinking, and we have to have that.
We do.
In order to make it, we have to have, and this is where I think that they're successfully attacking in the media. When I say the media, more social media than anything, when they're successfully attacking is the set of facts. What are the facts that we at least have some agreement on, so that we can then have a logical discussion about what's the solution to solve this problem or prevent a problem from happening. What is it? The U.S. military, they need to have intelligence, and they need to have as accurate as they can find, because they're about to commit a division of Marines or something like that and make a military.
Life and death decisions.
It's a life and death decision. They need to know what it is. And the same thing is in business.
Mm-hmm.
We can't in business, and I've spent all my adult life just about in business, we can't deal with something we wish was the situation. It's like this
You won't be in business for long.
You won't be in business for long because you have to have an agreed upon set of facts within the company and within the industry. And, when I was in the ski business that we agreed on, and Rosenthal would look and say, hey, we've got, there's this opportunity to sell 1.2 million pairs of skis in the United States. And where are they, and how is it sold, and what kind of advertising is it going to take? And
so you gather facts as much as you can, but then there comes a time when you have to make a decision. There is a deadline, and
Yes.
you can't go beyond that deadline. And you think, I have insufficient data to really make a decision I'm fully confident in. So it's a sort of an element of a gamble in making that decision. But then that's also business, because if you're under that deadline, so are your competitors probably also under that deadline. Who makes the best guess? And so, it's that way in the military as well, right?
In the military.
I think our intelligence indicates that the enemy has strength, and it's located over here in this kind of strength, these kinds of weapons. They have artillery, they don't. And then, you know, our best is to deploy this way, fake that way, and then go this way. Whatever it is, that's a plan. We think it'll work, but we never know till the battle starts.
And now you get to the right thing, that since the very beginning, once the first bullet's fired, the plan goes out the window. However, and I think I've said this before, Eisenhower said, it's not the planning. It's not the plan that's important, it's the planning. And he had one thing that he wanted. He had many things, but he had one thing that every soldier on the Normandy battlefield, he wanted to remember, whether you were a general or a private. And that was, if you got separated from your unit in the chaos and the confusion, that your responsibility was to get to the high ground and hold it until somebody came to help you. And if everybody, that was what they were trying to do, there'd be more people coming to help you.
If everyone followed that same
If everybody followed,
simple
that was the order.
Yeah.
Everybody follow this.
So, and also, it's not so much the plan as the planners also. The planner is able to adjust to changing circumstances in the middle of a battle, and that's critical.
That's
you
critical.
have people who can keep their head, who can still make rational decisions. So this isn't working. I'm going to stop. Let's try this.
But that's where the planning process comes, because you think through those. You wind up thinking through scenarios.
Okay, so you have several possible scenarios. You have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, etc. But still, some things can often go wrong that you didn't plan for these things, and yet you have to adapt to them. And so you need a certain kind of intelligence and chutzpah in order to be able to do it,
absolutely.
and while maintaining the confidence of those to whom you give orders. This guy seems to know what the heck he's doing. If that's what he says, I believe him. We're going to go do it, even though it risks my life. And all those things are critical. So interpersonal relationship.
Interpersonal relationships. Trust. Gets down to trust.
The older we get, here before,
we have been. Yeah. The older we get, the more we understand how important trust is.
Yes, it is.
In all kinds of human relations.
It is.
Yes. Yeah, so I don't know, no simple answers, but we do, but what's required of citizens, if we take Eisenhower's idea that we have to get to the high ground and hold it, what's required of citizens is for them to try to gather the facts, use their thinking skills, try to gather the facts, and then make a decision. And it's called calculated risk taking. In business we have a calculated risk. Maybe the risk is as wide as this, but with planning and thinking about this and involving your people who are involved in the business enterprise with you, you try to bring it to this size, not this size. And you've got more of a chance of getting across. You're not going to eliminate the risk entirely. There's always risk.
My brother came to see me. He's in the plumbing and heating and air conditioning and HVAC, I guess you call it, business. And so he's a small businessman. So one of the clients I have needs a new boiler. Well, all right. Well, I've had this client long enough that 30 years ago we put this boiler in. So it was a Burnham boiler. And it's leaking because it's cast iron and it has a leak. And the leak's going to get worse, so we got to replace the boiler. So okay, we'll do it when the snow melts. Anyway, so I asked my brother, I said, this Burnham boiler now, my other brother put it in 30 years ago, and he was in the business. So he said they're known for that. They're flaw. It's a flaw. It's a casting flaw. So this is actually the second boiler because the same flaw existed with the replacement. It was under warranty, but that's why the company went out of business, because they had a warrant. They had to warrant their boiler, and it was a flaw. It was a basic design flaw. It was an engineering issue. So the company is no longer in business. Well, good.
That's what happens.
Yeah, don't bail them out. They screwed up.
Heck no.
There are others that are fully competent that will take up the slack.
Exactly.
And so we're going to get a different kind of boiler. It's a German-made boiler. So I don't know, whatever. So that's international trade. So that's how capitalism is supposed to work, right?
It's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
That the
bailouts don't work, I don't think. I'm against bailouts.
Yeah.
Whether it's General Motors or whether it's Burnham Boilers.
Right.
I think you screw up, you make bad decisions, then other companies will pick up the slack. So just, we don't need to bail you out.
No, I get it. And if they do it, it's not for a business reason, it's for a social reason. A social, economic, political reason that they do it.
Yes.
There's 500,000 people working here who all have mortgages.
So did we care about General Motors or did we care about the UAW?
Do we care about the people who are working there? Yeah.
Yes, right.
That's right. Yeah, because, a small business, and I've been, mostly involved in small business and represented small business. And, there's nobody coming to bail out a small business. That's the first thing.
Right, government's not going to do it because so what?
Nobody's coming, so what? You employ 3 people, who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a point. But, okay. So General Motors, what was the UAW's stake in that was, if General Motors goes bankrupt, then the contracts they had with the UAW are then null and void. They have to be renegotiated.
Yeah.
So that was the issue.
Well, and there was another issue too, and that was what would happen to all the suppliers that didn't get paid. The people who are making all the small parts.
Yeah.
That was another.
That's another issue.
You get into these big business,
yeah.
big industries, and you have supply chains,
Yes.
which are, it's very disruptive.
And hard to understand because the roots and the branches go in so many different directions. Who can comprehend the whole?
Who can figure out what everything looks like easily? It's not easily done.
And speaking of which,
Yeah.
We have China under, their economy is because of this virus that they're dealing with.
Hey, we
probably
lost
not so well.
nearly a couple thousand points on the U.S. stock market.
We have.
As a result of people being nervous about it.
Yes, or looking ahead and saying, well, speaking of supply chain that you brought up, our supply chain, it goes through many parts of China.
It goes through many parts of the world.
Yes, and so if China is not putting out, this kind of component and that kind of component for these things that we put together and manufacture and sell, then it's going to affect us because the supply chain is disrupted.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a huge, is it going to be a tidal wave or is it going to be, a temporary storm? And nobody knows that yet for sure.
Well, this is what gets into the so-called transnational threats.
Transnational
threats. Yes, which I've been, when I came back from Washington, I was looking at several things. One was about water. And
so Jim was in Washington for 3 administrations and small business administration and something else, trade representative.
And the Export-Import Bank.
Okay.
And then a White House task force on veterans business development. Yeah.
So the point you were making
but the point I was making is when I came back, I looked at 7 or 8 what I thought were going to be important things in the 21st century that would be disruptors of some form. And I was interested in it for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to dig into it and see if there was something I could add to my entrepreneurship course that would, be
Which
interesting.
Which he teaches at Freiburg Academy, but you did it at University of Maine system as well.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
And so, I was looking at these things, and one of the things that I identified was a transnational threat. And it's not just terrorism, it's, and it's not just cyber attacks that come across the border and can shut down your entire electric grid if they did it right, but it's also disease. And I got to thinking about that because I was doing some work in Brazil, and I was in Brasilia, and I was at a restaurant there with a cabinet member that
It's in the central part of the country, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
A planned city.
It was a planned city.
Yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
And actually, the system of government, although I'm not certain we'd want to have it, Americans would be happy with it. Their system in their constitution is very similar to ours, but it's been distorted, in my opinion. So at any rate, I was in this restaurant.
Transnational threat there.
I was in this restaurant, and there were Americans at another table, I heard them talking. And so after I had dinner, I went over and introduced myself and said hello. And they were from the Center for Disease Control. And I thought, oh, are you down here for a conference? There were about 10 or 11 of them. They said, no, we're permanently stationed down here. And I said, really? I said, why? They said, because there's a lot going on in the Amazon, and there are a lot of viruses and bacteria that have not been exposed to the general world population, and we're here to identify them and see if there's anything that could become a pandemic.
About when would this have been?
Well, I can tell you exactly when it was, 2000.
All right,
Yeah.
20 years ago. Go ahead.
20 years ago. And I thought, what? And then they started talking about it, and I thought, my God, there are 11. That's all you've got here. This is a big area, the Amazonian jungle.
yeah.
But so they were looking at this type of thing.
Probably in
even
many other
then.
places in the world as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
In tropical places.
In tropical
especially.
places and places where the population centers were not huge, or places where the population center was huge.
So we have this virus now and on the stage last night, Joe Biden was saying, yeah, well, when Ebola came around, I was the vice president, Barack and I, we go on top of it and we did this and that and so forth. And so, but Ebola, now we still don't really know where Ebola came from.
Right.
I mean, we were able to keep it squashed and contained and,
Right.
and it went away, but then it rears its head again.
Which we have
and
to do,
We
you
have
know.
to keep doing.
Yeah.
But it can't, the best scenario, the best guess, it seems like, it transferred from monkeys to us. Maybe somebody
Yeah.
ate a monkey and it came, and then it
Right.
spread person to person.
Right.
And so, okay, and this one we have now, coronavirus, we don't really know where that came
It
from. I
may
mean,
have come from exotic animals that
people put
are
bats in a
wild.
soup and ate
Yeah.
it, and so
Right.
or there's a bioweapons depot in Wuhan, right near the epicenter of where the corona. So was
Yeah.
it this or was it that? We don't know.
We
It
don't know.
Almost doesn't matter now,
Right.
because there's the virus. Study it, try and counteract it. Think of
Exactly.
treatments for it. Look for a vaccine to prevent it. So, yeah, this is a constant thing.
It's a constant battle.
Yeah.
But then, the universe is a pretty tough place. It's
noticed that.
Yeah. I mean, we sit here all fat, dumb, and happy, and an asteroid could hit us in the next day and alter the entire course of human history in a second.
That's right.
And so we don't know what's going to
We don't know where
happen.
these threats are going to come from.
Right.
No.
We don't. But we have to, as human beings, our responsibility is to try to deal with it as we see it.
Yes, and also we have to be versatile. Now, America has been, in our history, we have a tradition of versatility and then individual initiative. And I can persuade, look, Jim, look, this is what's coming. I got an idea. What if we did this? And
Exactly.
if I could convince you and you could convince others, then it happens from the ground up.
That's
the
right.
solution comes from the ground up. We have this tradition. We expect it. We think that all countries have this, this kind of a cultural aspect to them, and I'm not sure that's the case because
I don't think it is the case, and
we think this way,
Right.
and this is our greatest strength,
it's a strength.
and our government doesn't get in the way of it.
Yes.
And so, but what's happening in China now is government is trying to control what's happening,
Yes.
to the coronavirus, and it's just making the situation worse, and they can't contain it. And then they put out propaganda, and viruses don't care about propaganda. They're
No.
going to go where they're going to go.
No.
Yeah.
That's creating the fantasy.
It is.
And one of the things, to go back to the Normandy invasion again, one of the things that the Americans were very successful at, the Germans were very top-driven
Yes.
down. They didn't make a move. If you were a sergeant or a private, you weren't making a move until the general told you what to do. And the general wasn't making a move until somebody above him told him or what to do. And the Americans were, when they ran into the hedgerows, they went, well, wait a minute here. The average corporal was going, whoa, we're getting shot up here. We're not doing this. Let's figure out how we can do something about this. And they did. they went back to the beach and got those pieces of metal that were crossed like that, and they put them on the front of their tanks, and they welded them into place, and then they drew up the plans and mimeographed it, and they sent a mimeograph all the way down the front for the others to do the same thing.
That's what we're good at.
And that is, that's an important thing. It's that kind of ingenuity that is important, and it's important in your life. It's important in my life, and it's important in the life of the country, in my opinion.
It is.
It's what I teach my students and talk about to my students.
We're going to do this early, just so we can get these out of the way.
Sure.
And do it. Yep. All right, here we go. Oh, wait, we didn't even do the second part of this question. Why do you think they would want to encourage a Bernie Sanders victory in the Democrat primary? The Russians. Why might they think Bernie Sanders would be better for Russia?
I think they probably. Let's assume we have to have an assumption that they think that Trump is a better person to have as a U.S. president.
Yeah.
I don't think they
Are
think
they
that
helping
Sanders.
Trump and Sanders? I mean,
no. Or they
opposite
think
ends of
that
the
Sanders
spectrum.
is a weak candidate.
Maybe. Okay.
Could be.
Could be.
I don't know.
Or could be.
That he's a weaker candidate.
And that Trump will easily win if Bernie becomes the Democrat nominee. Well, that seems to be what the DNC believes as well. And
Could be.
If you watched that debate last night, and it was set up to, I mean,
They went after
the
two
pundits
people,
ahead of
didn't
time
they?
were saying, well, tonight we can expect the other 6 candidates to go after Bernie pretty hard tonight. And last week it was, they're gonna go after Bloomberg, and they did. And last night they're going to go after Bernie, and they did. And Bernie happened to be standing right in the middle and had 3 to one side, 3 to the other. And they were, he was getting incoming from both sides, and it just happened just the way it was scripted. Because they don't, the DNC organized the debate, and what was it? DNC and some organization of black voters or something in South Carolina.
They probably have a local.
Yeah.
They have the DNC,
and it was a
and then they have a
relatively
local.
small hall.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. So.
Yeah, wait. Okay, so I tune in at 8 o'clock, and boy, you'd think it was like the Super Bowl was coming. I mean, the way
really?
CBS orchestrated
yes.
it, they had their sets, and they had
Yes.
this dramatic music,
Yes.
and they had these lights and things
Yes.
moving around,
Yes.
and okay, and here they come, and it's
Yes.
almost like they're running out of the, into the stadium, and here's so-and-so plays
I
tight
know.
end, and number so-and-so. And
The whole thing makes me ill.
it did, and so, oh God, all right, I'm already put off, and they haven't even started talking yet.
I know.
And here are our moderators, and there were 2 women, and then they later brought in about 4 or 5 more of them for the second half of the debate, and it got a little better. But and then they went right after each other, and so then Bernie, okay, so it was out of control. So you had Bernie was talking, and then there'd be cat calls from the audience. Boo,
really?
boo, boo, whatever, depending on what. Is it because they're booing Bernie, or are they booing what he is saying, or others other speakers they did the same thing too. So this, and of course, there it is, and then Bernie was trying to, I don't know what that was about, and he'd go with his point. And then on the way in here this morning, I hear he's being interviewed. And during this exchange, when the audience reacted this way, and you paused for a minute, and he said, yeah, I did. And then he brought out a point. He said, the tickets to come into that theater cost $1,700 a piece.
What?
Yeah, that's a factor.
Wow.
And he said, and the DNC organized it that way.
Wow.
And so, therefore, who paid for their tickets?
Yeah.
And are they then become the cheering section for or against this idea or that person? And he had a point, I had to say. So that was interesting, dynamic.
Wow. Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
No, I didn't watch it. These things get to be just sort of like you say, they're a staged, you don't learn anything new, really, I don't think.
I was happy that they were so disorganized, because I don't want to see any of them win. I'd like to see them lose. because of their ideas. But Bernie, last night I called Jim, and are we on for today, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and as always, when we get together, we could do a show. If somebody were there to tape it or to video it, then we just do it. Whenever we get together, we just do it, and we have for 30, 40 years.
For 40 years,
Whenever I run into him at the store or at the dump or wherever it might be.
It's been funny, hasn't it? It's been fun.
It has been. So we're just continuing it here on this show.
Yeah, that's right.
So last we were talking about, Bernie couldn't really get this across, and he's a socialist, but he wouldn't want to take over factories or something. Well, after we talked, I ran across something, a quote. This was in the National Review. And he says, he talks about taking over. Okay, here it is. He's a 44-year-old mayor of Burlington at this point. So it's and he's 78 now.
78 now.
So
that was 44 years ago or so.
So this is late 70s, early 80s,
middle
or something like that.
70s, yeah.
All right. So Bernie is a 44-year-old mayor when he told the Los Angeles Times that he espouses, quote, traditional socialist goals: public ownership of oil companies, factories, utilities, banks, etc.
Oh, interesting.
Now, that's socialism, communism. I mean, there's a pretty big overlap right there if he's talking like this.
Yeah.
And so now we have to ask ourselves, okay, is this 40 years ago idea still extant in Bernie's mind today when he says, I am a democratic socialist? Well, that's the big question,
Well,
isn't
that's
it?
questions people should be asking him.
It is.
Yeah. Once again, it's a very interesting thing. There's only one state bank in the United States.
The Federal Reserve.
No,
Then what?
the Bank of North Dakota is a
state bank.
It's owned by the state of North Dakota.
Okay, I thought.
And it was started because British banks were foreclosing on farms out in the prairie. It was a prairie populist idea, and because British banks were loaning lots of money, and they were foreclosing on the land. And the farmers would go out there, and they would go out and they would work hard at getting the land organized for farming and build a house and a barn or something.
What period of time would this was
that was in right around either
Post-Civil
1890s,
War?
1900s.
Okay. All right. When the federal government was encouraging settlement.
Exactly.
In that area. Okay.
And so they thought, we've had enough of that. We're starting our own bank. And it's still an incredibly successful enterprise that a very conservative state, they wouldn't do away with the Bank of North Dakota no matter what. So, you never know how these things in certain very specific industries might work out. I mean, what do we have if when we bail out the banking system to the tune of trillions of dollars? What do we have?
2008, they did.
2008.
Yeah.
Man, I'm telling you.
It was the Bush administration that put it together.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And in 2017 was when they pumped about 15 or 16 trillion dollars into the global banking system to provide liquidity. So you look at these things and it's hard. That's why I understand it's difficult. People are trying to earn a living. They've got sick kids. They're sick. They're trying to figure out how to have health care or how to put food on the table. All these types of things. It's hard to look at a world that's moving really fast and where there are all kinds of things coming at you. I get that it's hard to sit and look and get a big picture of what the heck is happening.
And so we have this situation, like we have this coronavirus, called COVID-19 is now they're calling it.
Yeah.
If it does manifest here, the way it manifests, say in northern Italy right now, okay, so what is it, where did those people come from? It doesn't matter, except it's spreading fast in certain municipalities in northern Italy. What are they doing in Italy? They're freezing people, no movement within this area.
Right, in Milan.
Cut right off. Yes. So that reminds me of what was done when we had these the Boston Marathon bombers, these two Muslims from
Yes.
from the former Soviet Republic over there.
Yeah.
One of them was loose, and he was loose around the greater Boston area.
Right.
They shut down the whole area.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Right.
now, with what authority and what entity, what government entity did that? Was that a federal order that did it? Was it a state that did it?
Well, that's
But
a good
nobody
question.
objected to that.
No.
Okay, now did whatever government entity did it, a combination of them who did it, they found the guy and that's good and nobody objected after it, but some people questioned it, and that's where I picked it up. How did this happen? Is that a violation of civil liberties, those people who were there? Does that constitute enough of an emergency where martial law essentially can
Essentially,
be
it's martial
declared? That's
law.
what it is. And will that be done now with this coronavirus? I mean, certainly Italy's doing it.
Yeah.
In their area,
Uh-huh.
and when you cut off a country
People
as well,
will do a lot of things when they get frightened, really frightened.
oh, will overlook things.
They will
somebody
overlook it.
takes charge.
Somebody takes charge. and
which is a good thing and a scary thing at
it
the
is,
same time.
both at the same time. But Lincoln did it,
He did.
you know,
He did, and he got away with it.
and he got away with it. He made an executive order
Yeah.
to do it. He didn't ask the Congress,
No.
you
he
know.
didn't.
Yeah.
So is this coming, and what will happen? And now the CDC is talking about get ready for closures of schools, get
Yes.
ready for public events to be
Yes.
shut down. Do they now? It does say in the Constitution, in the Fifth Amendment, but in times of national, I forget the exact wording, but. It's kind of nebulous, you know, great stress. I used to know them. I could have rattled off
Well-
the Fifth Amendment. I can't anymore.
I know,
And when
I
I was
can't.
teaching it, I could.
I can't either.
Anyway, but there is a provision in there
Yeah.
that's kind of elastic.
Well, they made
you
it
can do
pretty elastic.
They did.
Yeah.
And so I guess that can be used at the federal level. Now, does each state, most states model on the Constitution, but with variations, you know, in state constitutions.
Yes.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. And if
Well-
it's prolonged, you know, you're going to have to think about
Well, we certainly want, I mean, if it goes back to the concept that they also understood, which was that government moves where individuals can't do it for themselves. And in a case like that, then government looks at it and says, you know, what's in the common good here? And can all of us individually do that, or will people try to, you know, not self-quarantine themselves? And I know that I was thinking about this and thinking about my grandfather had the flu in 1918,
Yeah.
and excuse me, the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody yesterday who had just looked up all information on the Spanish flu, and that it came in through the city of Boston.
Yeah, I was just I
Commonwealth
wrote my
Pier.
column this week on that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. And something like 800 soldiers died at Devon's.
Yep.
And I thought, well, they just came from
Within
Europe.
about a 1 month period.
Oh, yes. And they just came
October
from Europe.
2018.
They came from Europe.
Yeah.
The soldiers. It was
Some of them did,
1917.
and some of them were being deployed to Europe.
Yes, but somebody, you know, you got to know that any of them that might have been in Europe, living in those trenches and under really hard circumstances, you could see where disease could be an issue.
Oh, sure.
And
it was.
And it was. So, you know, so do you know, it killed, how many, you probably know how many
800
million.
and something thousand Americans died. And
800.
They called swine flu, Spanish flu. It had
Yeah.
multi-names.
So
No
800,000 people
No
died
antibiotics.
in the United States. And think of how many people were in the United States at the time. That was a big percentage.
It was. Yeah.
And if you had
under 100 million, I think. Between
Oh,
50
yes,
and
it would have been
100
under
million.
100 million, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if you had people, Americans,
It's one of 100 people, probably.
pardon me?
1 out of 100 people.
Yeah.
died, you know.
Americans are going to be willing to have someone do something to help manage this and enforce it. That's going to be the issue.
It is.
And, you know, and it's not because, I think, it's not because the majority, by a big majority of Americans, wouldn't try to do the right thing, because I think they would. But you don't need many people not doing the right thing
No.
to spread it.
True.
And so it becomes an issue. And my grandfather fortunately survived, and later that year married my grandmother.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Well, the demographic that the virus targeted then was young adults.
Yes, they were young.
So that's different from what we're so far seeing with this new
This
virus.
one is after older people.
Well, they're the ones who die.
Yes.
But are the ones who are infected, I think it's indiscriminate. But the ones who died then were, and we still don't know, really, why.
Yeah.
You know, we just don't. Why?
Yeah.
And about 100 different sites. Some say 50 million worldwide, some say 100 million worldwide. That's quite a discrepancy.
It is.
I mean, no one's keeping count.
I know.
I mean, this is only 100 years ago.
I know.
I mean, and we still don't know about this, things about viruses that after 100 years.
I know.
It's just, and can this happen again? I'm reading a Coolidge biography, and Harding hadn't died yet, and so I think it's about 1921. And Harding, you know, he talks, the author talks about swine flu, but that had already come and gone. I mean,
Yeah.
Harding was elected in 2020.
Yeah.
And so it had pretty much been spent by then. It was
Yeah.
spent by the end of 2018, a little bit begins into 2019, and that's it. You know, it just kind of disappeared. So will this one disappear
its
too?
course.
I mean, Trump is banking on it. He's saying, yeah, by April, when things warm up, I mean, it should probably pretty much go away.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
I'm not so
true
sure
or
that's
not.
true. I think
Right.
that's going to come back to haunt him, because this is an election year.
Yeah, it is.
And his enemies can use that against
Oh,
him
sure.
if it turns out differently, that it doesn't go away. in
Well, as
April
Harry
19.
Truman says, politics, it ain't beanbag.
No, it ain't. No, it ain't. So that's another thing I mentioned in the column. I'm thinking, you know, he said, yeah, we got it under control. It's not going to happen like in the United States, like, because we got control of our borders and so forth. And I'm thinking, oh, geez.
No,
you know.
I mean, how do we have control over our borders unless we don't want people to have free association and be able to fly here or fly there to do business? Are we going to shut down the entire business community of the United States?
There it is. You know, when we say between now and November is an eternity in politics.
It is.
And right now, if the election were held tomorrow, it looks like Trump's going to win, hands down. Maybe he'll win 49 states against Bernie, some say. But this one thing, you know, what he's saying now in India, or wherever the heck he was when he said it, and then, you know, he returns and then things happen.
And people get sick.
And people get sick.
And people
then they
panic.
look, oh, he's not handling this right. And he's just...
And grandma and grandpa are the ones dying.
Yep. I mean...
And it's not the kids,
Nope.
which grandpa and grandma are happy it's not the kids.
Yeah.
I don't want my grandson and my new grandson coming to die.
Yeah.
I'd rather go myself.
Exactly.
You know.
Right.
So, but there are going to be a lot of people aren't going to be happy that grandma and grandpa are dying.
So, yes, I mean, unpredictable. And those of us that have seen enough presidential cycles know that it's an eternity.
It's an eternity.
Like you said, an asteroid. You just never know what
never
is
know.
going to come down the pike.
You never know.
And be adaptable to it.
Yes, but you were going to what was the other one?
Oh, yeah. Okay, here it is. Do you feel the Trump administration is adequately prepared for dealing with the coronavirus? Okay,
Yeah.
we answered it before.
We answered it. Yeah. Perhaps not
No.
completely, but you know, that therein is a reason that there are a lot of things that you have to pay attention to, and you know, you can think, oh, I don't have to pay attention to it, but you know, things like the CDC, you got to pay attention to. Because we're very vulnerable. Every one of us is very vulnerable to disease, and one that comes quickly and can be passed just by, you know, a cough or a sneeze.
The way the flu and
The way the
ordinary flu
is
which it
passed.
seems like this one is
Yes.
passed that way. From what we know of it so far.
From what we know so far, yeah.
So let's see. I'm trying to think of the name of So Trump makes these statements in India, but then I saw another report where he's been making them since early February about the coronavirus, but I didn't happen to hear them. And he's basically downplaying it. And I'm trying to think of Larry Kudlow is an economic advisor.
Oh, so yes, he was on something this morning.
Yes, okay.
CNBC, I think.
Yes,
and
that's where he's
reporting it on NPR this morning.
Trying to prevent, a third stock market panic, a day of it, that is.
Right.
And so,
I know.
I smelled my BS alarm went off.
Oh, yeah.
So you got Trump saying this and Kudlow saying that, and backing each other up. And then you got the CDC coming out and saying, be ready for a big problem. And it's severe disruption of everyday life.
And they were mincing their words a little bit. They weren't trying to fan any panic flames, I noticed, which I think that's the way they should be.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be fanning flames.
Yeah.
They should be dealing with this thing in a very calm, cool, collected manner. But they can't go, we don't have to worry about this. That's not where they should be.
So, but they're basically contradicting what the president and Kudlow are saying. And then his own HHS secretary, Alter or something like that, his name is. They changed so much I can't keep track.
I know, I can't either.
He basically backed up the CDC and contradicted. So there's a division within government, and so this.
Well, you see,
what are the political ramifications of that? They could be very serious.
Well, it could be very serious.
Depending on what happens in the next several months.
It could be very serious. This is where we go back to what we started talking about, where it's the fantasy. They don't want this to be true. I don't blame them. I wouldn't want it either.
Right.
I hope it isn't true.
Right.
I hope that it doesn't come here. I don't want people to die. But I know, just like in business, it's not snowing in Colorado, and you're looking at it and you go, oh, geez, let's not get panicked and start putting the skis on sale because it might snow and it's going to be fine. Because if that happens and they're sitting on the skis, guess what? They're not able to pay you. And or they go out of business, and now you're losing a lot of the base. And so, you can't live like that. You've got to say, okay, this is going on in the world. We know it's going on in the world. And we're working on this. We've got the CDC working on it. We're doing our best. We're coordinating with the World Health.
Talk out of his rear end like he did, because based on what knowledge, and it's more that we don't know than we do know about this. And anybody, I'm not a medical person.
No, me either.
But I've watched it enough and I've read enough. Other people who do know what they're talking about, and they're saying there are a lot of uncertainties here.
There are a lot of uncertainties, and I think we should. That's the position we should be taking.
But
we're
he isn't.
On this.
He just went out on a limb.
Yeah.
And then not good.
Yeah, and I think they should. We have to deal with the reality of the situation.
We do.
It goes back to that again.
Yeah.
I mean.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So then, another thing we talked about last night was, as always, whenever we get together, our conversation ranges far and wide, as much the way this show has gone. But he talked about, cancer, speaking of which. Now, Jim, Jim has been dealing with that. He lost a kidney in late
December 17th.
A cancerous kidney, and so he's so here's what Bernie has to say. I have my own feelings about what causes cancer and the psychosomatic aspects of cancer. One wonders if now he visits the Sandinistas.
Now, when did he say? This was in the 80s.
In 1980s.
Yeah.
So he's visiting with the Sandinistas, and one of them is succumbing to cancer, and so he says, I have my own feelings about what causes cancer. Yeah. One wonders if the war in Nicaragua did not claim another victim or another person or another person who couldn't deal with her tremendous grief and suffering about what's going on in her own country.
Well, you see, that is wrong to think that way, as it is for Trump to say
It is.
the other thing
It is.
in Kudlow. I mean, are you kidding? There's science behind this, and they're learning what causes cancer. In my case, it's presumptive that which is a legal term or a medical term, that's presumptive that this may have been caused by drinking contaminated water at Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
800,000 gallons of fuel leaked into the aquifer over a 34-year period, and they dumped over a 34-year period, they dumped solvents, dry cleaning solvents and solvents that they use to clean tanks and heavy equipment like that, and they dumped them on it, and within the Camp Lejeune compound, so to speak, is New River, which is where the air wing is, and they have PFASs, which is a flame retardant that a lot of Air Force bases and Navy bases have this contamination of the water supply because they use it they practice with it and they use it, and it gets on the ground and it soaks into the ground and washes down into the aquifer. So in the end, it was 3,400 times the more toxic than the EPA would allow for drinking water. And we were drinking it, eating our food, cooked in it, showering, whatever. And
So your kidney cancer may be a result of exposure to that.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, if you were at Camp Lejeune versus Camp Pendleton, which is on the West Coast near San Diego, where the 1st Division is and the 2nd Division is at Camp Lejeune, if you were at Camp Lejeune for a minimum of 30 days, and they didn't have to be consecutive days. You could have been there, it could have been collectively a minimum of 30 days. But if you were there for a minimum of 30 days, your chance of having kidney cancer was 35% higher than the Marines at Camp Pendleton. That's not a small percentage.
No.
And this was done by
statistically significant.
Yes, it is,
Yes.
and it was done. And this was done. This study was done by the National Science Foundation. So they were looking at this thing.
Was it covered? Didn't you tell me that it was covered up too?
Yes,
for a while.
They covered it up. They wanted to cover up the National Science Foundation's. Yeah. And some cancers, it was as high as 68% more of a chance. There were other cancers that 2nd Division Marines would get it, or not just Marines, but their dependents. And this is
what living with them on base.
That lived on base housing. And there was a sergeant major who 7-year-old daughter died from a horrible cancer, and he was the one that started pushing into it. And then he finally, there are people that you might not want to make angry in this world, but I can tell you that a sergeant major in the Marine Corps is one of them. You do not want to have that person on the other side of you because they are not going to give up. And he was the one that actually helped to expose the whole thing.
I don't know how much time we have here, but maybe the producer can tell us what's left. But 7 minutes. Before the cameras went on, Jim and I were chatting, as we always do, and we were talking. He's had a cancerous incident, and he's still working his way through. And I had something. I have a chronic disease, and I had surgery a month ago. And I'm recovering pretty well. But
we're a couple of old sick guys.
Yeah. So this is something that's come on to you recently, but you had you had serious back issues when you were a younger man, and we talked about that. So each of us, I had my first surgery for this issue I have when I was 33. So I've been dealing with this 33 years, 35 years.
Yeah.
And it's a pre-existing condition, which makes insurance companies do not want to pick me up.
Yeah, right.
And it affected my career because I was a teacher when I had it, and it was a $50,000 operation in 1984, I think, is when I had my first one, which is expensive. And so that I was stuck in this job because if I couldn't, I got insurance, my insurance through the job. I couldn't, with this pre-existing condition, it kind of froze me there. And also it disabled me, and I just had my 7th operation. So over that time period. So it disables me for 4, 5, 6 weeks.
It limits your opportunities.
It does. And so I had enough sick days built up where I had young children, I had a mortgage, I was living paycheck to paycheck, 4 kids and so forth. And it was, so I was grateful that I had a job where I could keep working and pay the bills, and I had benefits. But I was also resentful that I was stuck there. I couldn't make a career change, and because of these issues, the same responsibilities that I had to maintain. So you had similar problems.
I had the similar problem, and it's the reason, which I think has worked out in the long term, that I toughed it out and didn't have surgery, because then I would have been in the same darn position by not having surgery and recovering through exercise and a lot of different things, and wearing a back brace that was really stiff. It wasn't a soft one, and doing exercises in the back room at ski shops with a yoga mat that I brought with me so I could lay down on it. Yeah, I had to fight through the same thing, and I can tell you how grateful I was for really 99.9% of my working life I had insurance. I sometimes had $5,000 deductibles to afford to keep it, but I had insurance as a catastrophic policy.
Right.
I know what it's like to grow up and break a hand, which I did when I was 13, and not have any insurance, and then to not to talk to my parents about it, because I did it playing basketball at Freiburg Academy, just in a gym class, and but I knew that if we had to go to the doctors to fix this hand, I was just hoping it would heal. Well, instead, I got a staph infection in it, and then they almost had to amputate part of my fingers. And but I, toughed it out for 2 or 3 days until my mother finally said, "Jim, what is wrong with you?" And I broke down and told her what was wrong, and she said, "No, we have to go to the doctors." And that's when they said, "We have to go to the hospital, because otherwise you're going to lose these." And that's not fun. That's a lot of responsibility for a 13-year-old. I was the oldest of 6 kids, and I knew it could mean that we didn't have money for food or something. Although we raised a lot of our food, but so I'm grateful when I have a way to pay for it.
Yes. So we were, and the other, he's had to deal with cancer, which he's dealt with surgically. They haven't prescribed, post chemotherapy.
No, we're doing it with CAT scans.
Okay.
That seems to be a way. Yeah, and the oncologist is at Dana-Farber in Scarborough.
So my daughter worked there 9 years at this Scarborough oncology clinic, and had to leave because it was just difficult, dealing, because you get to know her patients very well, and she had to administer the chemo.
Yeah.
And they'd die on her, and she got very close to them, and it was hard. So she moved on. But she says, insurance coverage, I can't tell you. And another part of her job was do you have the coverage to pay for this very expensive chemical that we got to squirt into your body?
Right.
And she got bitter about how insurance was a life and death thing in that particular clinic.
Absolutely.
And she started going over toward you know, the left-hand side of the political spectrum for that. That was her motivator, and so it's an issue. So
it's an issue.
if we deal with it personally, then it becomes a personal thing. And for so many others who luckily have not had to deal with it, face these questions and adjust their life in that way. We have a minute left.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad we got a chance.
Well, you know,
to
it would be good
talk
to
about that.
pick up on this maybe next time a little bit and talk about. I'd like to, you know, maybe explain. I've spent a lot of time in Switzerland. My best friend is Swiss, and so I watched how
that country
they
deals with
put
it.
their whole thing together, because they're very, you know, capitalist-oriented society too, and it's
That would
an
be
interesting
interesting.
story. It's a really interesting story.
Okay, so 1 month hence, when
Yep.
Jim returns, then we can deal with Switzerland and compare with what they have with what we have or should have.
Yeah.
Here, sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not simple.
No, it isn't.
No.
Well, thank you for being.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank
again,
you.
And I hope you come along.
Well, I hope you come
health
along
issues.
too.
I am. Thank you.
And you know, if
I
you
am.
don't learn anything else, you learn about how important family and friends are and neighbors when you get sick.
That's for sure. They come through for me.
They are indispensable.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.